Hello everyone and welcome. My name is Jasmine Candlish and I am the president of the Children's Guardian Fund. The goal of our organization is to help abused, abandoned and neglected children by offering financial support to our local Guardian Ad Litem program and to the children the Guardians represent. Today, our panel is going to talk about how and why children get removed from their birth families and taken into the custody of the state. We're also going to discuss what happens to the children once they're under the supervision of the courts, and how the Guardian Ad Litem program tries to make sure that each and every child in the system ends up in the best possible permanent home. I'm happy to have here with me today both Pam Hindman, who is the director of the 12th Judicial Circuit Guardian Ad Litem program, and also two very experienced volunteers. Alfredo Nunez lives in Bradenton and has been working as a Guardian Ad Litem for 3 years. Linda Jentz also lives in Bradenton and has been working as a Guardian for 7 years. Between them, they've helped almost 50 children navigate through the stress of being removed from their parents and placed into the care of the state before achieving permanent homes. As you can imagine, it's a bureaucratic process with lots of rules and regulations. Guardians are often the only people who can restore a personal, human, and caring touch to the rigidities of the system. So with that in mind, welcome again, and thank you all for being here. It's great to have you with us. Thank you. And my first question is for you, Pam. As director, you're in charge of the entire area, Bradenton, Manatee, Sarasota, DeSoto. So it would be great if you could give us some general statistics so that we can understand the scope of this problem. For example, how many children in our area have been removed from their birth families and are currently in the care of the state?
Well, Jasmine, it's a very fluid number, as you can imagine, and being a guardian yourself. We hover around 1,150 children currently. Over the past 3 years, I went back to look and see, and we've gained every year. It's a little bit more and a little bit more, but somewhere around 1,150 children a year that we deal with. I looked at May, and in May we had 61 children come into care.
And of course, this is one of those statistics where when it goes up, it's not good. We don't want to have more children in care. It would be great if one day there were no children in care. But does the percentage vary between Sarasota, and DeSoto, or is it pretty much consistent with the populations for those areas?
It does vary. A year ago, I would have said in Manatee County we had probably 100 more children than we did in Sarasota. But today, we have 100 more children in Sarasota than in Manatee. DeSoto stays fairly, pretty much the same all the time, somewhere around 100 children that they have in care.
Because, of course, it's a smaller, less populated county. Yeah.
Right.
So could you explain to us why and how children end up in care? And I guess the other question that comes to mind in that connection is it easy for parents to lose the right to raise their own children?
Well, the reasons that children come into care have changed again over time. I've been doing this 10 years now, and it's changed a lot from when I first started. Right now, of course, we're seeing so much with prescription drug abuse. I looked this morning at, we had a case come in early this morning with a couple of children, and the first allegation is misuse of drugs. And what that tells me is it's a legal drug, it's prescription drug, but the parents are not using it the way they're supposed to. Yeah. And then the second is neglect. And obviously, if you have parents who are strung out on drugs, then they're not paying attention to the needs of their children. And so we're really concerned about the safety of children. Your second question was about children coming into care and what it is.
Is it easy for parents to lose control of their children? If a neighbor just calls and says, I don't like the way my next door neighbor is raising their kids, can that family be at risk of losing their children?
Well, if they're creating a situation where their children are not safe, it's very possible. The thing that we all are obligated to do is if we see or suspect any kind of abuse, we should call the hotline, the 1-800-96-ABUSE, where you report both child abuse and elder abuse. And they'll send out somebody to investigate if they deem that the allegations are severe enough to cause an investigation. It's not what the state wants to do, remove their children from their families. We know that children don't do well when they've been removed from their families. But this is what happens if the family's not providing a safe environment for the child. So, those children, they get removed, and parents have to do what the state asks them to do to get their children returned to them.
So they will have a method of getting their children back that they understand, and they have a path that they can pursue that they know about in order to reclaim their children.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yes. Every family, if the child is removed, is going to get a case plan. They're going to have specific things that they're going to have to do, tasks that they're going to have to complete in order to prove to the state that the home that they're providing for their child is a safe home. Parents all love their children. I don't think you could ask a parent, do you love your children? Of course they love their children, but they get sidetracked with things like the drugs, domestic violence, just even sometimes people who are uneducated on how to care for children. So,
just don't have the basic tools as to what needs to be done.
Correct.
So how many guardians like Alfredo and Linda do we have that are currently certified in this 12th?
Well, never enough, of course, but we're very fortunate in the 12th Circuit. We have today, I think, 405 volunteers. We have a class that's going on right now of people who are training to become volunteers. We're always looking for more volunteers, and anybody who is interested in volunteering would either go to our website at www.12gal.org, where there's an application that they can download, or they could call any of our offices, the Sarasota office at 861-4875, or the Manatee office at 744-9473, and find somebody who could give them information on how to become a guardian.
And so one last question for you before we turn to our guardians and talk to them a little bit about some of the cases and the children that they've worked with. How does somebody train to become a guardian? Since they're going to be working with the court system, do they need to have a legal background?
Oh, absolutely not. They just have to have a real passion for seeing the best for children. And they do have to train. Anytime that you're working with children these days, you have to have screening. So the first thing we would do is have a personal interview with a person, one-on-one. We would do a background check to make sure that they don't have any kind of history. And then, we train them. We give them 30 hours of class time training so that they'll understand the system, understand what their job is. And then they have a lot of support. All of our volunteers start out with mentors. I think both of these folks have been mentors. I know they've been very involved with helping other people get up to speed to become good guardians. So we stand there, we support them. We make sure that they know what they're doing.
The first case is a bit intimidating, but after that you do understand what the routine is and get into. So turning to our volunteer guardians, could we talk for a while about some of your cases?
Sure.
When I was training as a guardian, I remember being warned that not all cases were going to have storybook happy endings, no matter how hard I worked. and how much I wanted everything to turn out right. But I thought it would be interesting and perhaps cheerful making. If you could tell us about, each of you could tell us about a case that you specifically worked where everything defied the odds, and although how it started out sounding grim, it all worked out so that there was a happy ending. How about Alfredo? Can you?
Okay. There's a case that I'm still involved with after a little over 2 years. The mother left the children unattended in a van for a spell to run in to do some shopping, and it was a hot summer day. The police found the children and they removed the children, and the dependency system became involved. Mom had a case plan. As Pam pointed out, that's the pathway to recovering the children. And she worked a case plan. She loves her children. She's a hardworking mom. She made a mistake. And eventually, through the process of getting the children reunified, she got them back. 2 months later, another incident happened, another removal. The children then were placed in foster care. They had been with a relative before that. And that becomes very difficult. The children became separated from each other. There were 4 of them. Very difficult situation. Mom continued to work her case plan. There was issues around domestic violence that one of the fathers was involved with, and her relationship with him, and it didn't look as though anything good was going to turn out with this case. The 4 children were eventually sent abroad, which we felt was the best, in the best interest for these children. And Mom agreed that would be a good placement with grandparents who lived abroad. That same day, that same night when the children left, she gave birth to her 5th child. 5th child was removed because she continued a relationship with the father.
Who was the one
who caused part of the problem.
The domestic.
And so again, another setback for this family and these children. I'm glad to report that Mom did get the child back. She has since separated any kind of relationship with this gentleman. And she's very happy. The children are happy where they are right now. And it's a different type of happy ending.
Yes.
They're not all together as a family, but they're happy, and the children are where they need to be at this point in time. And Mom is successful at getting back.
I think that's one of the things that I learned rather fast, that family situations can be messy, much messier than we imagined, and that the happy endings that we sometimes visualize at the beginning of the case are not actually what's in the best interest of the child, and that there are all sorts of situations that can mean happy endings for children. Linda, I'd love to hear about one of your cases.
Well, I've had several that turned out very well. The case that I started out talking about started out the same way. Mother left the 4-month-old in a car, went into shop, but actually shoplift, was arrested. The baby was, they figured in there only 20 minutes, which was wonderful, because any longer and that would have been devastating. So the child was removed. She already had 1 child in the care of her parents. I think he was about 1.5 years at that point. And this child, fortunately, was also placed in the same home, which was wonderful. Many times it's not that easy to find a loving home, and these are the grandparents of these 2 children.
And so there are siblings now living with their grandparents.
Yes.
Yes, which is really great.
And the mother tried over 1 year's time. She would get a job and then lose it. She would sign up for classes and not go. She would, she was making very little effort, actually, considering she had 1 year, 1 full year, to work her case plan, but kept saying, and obviously loved the children. It was very plain that she loved the children, but she could not get away from the drugs. And the biological father was a very bad influence and a detriment to the case all the way through. Finally, she surrendered her parental rights. He appealed the termination of parental rights case. So then 6 months later, we found out that the court denied his appeal, and then, and only then, could the children be available for adoption so they could have a permanent home, which is what we're all striving for, a permanent home for the children, a loving permanent home for the children. And you know, the fact that these children were with their grandparents was even a more blessing, because we really favor some family member being the permanent caregiver for these children. So it all turned out very well, even though it took a lot longer than anyone anticipated. They are happy now in that home.
I think that's one of the things that perhaps before I started to become involved with this program that I didn't realize. It isn't necessarily that the system is being slow, it's that people have legal rights. And if they choose to exercise those legal rights as parents, you can have this precious newborn baby that would be adoptable by 1,000 willing people in the community. And by the time the legal process is finished, that dear little newborn baby can be 4 or 5 years old. And with a history of multiple placements in the meantime, nothing to do with the system, but because of the legal rights of the parents who may or may not be protesting this. Not all the problems come from within. Some of them are caused by the chaotic situation of the families.
When Linda was talking about having permanency being our one objective, we want a permanent, loving, safe home. I had some interesting statistics of the children that we took from that were in care. Last year we had 11 that were adopted, or just in May. We had 11 adoptions. We had 3 children who turned 18. We had 4 who got transferred out of our jurisdiction. 40 were reunified, and 33 had parental guardianship, which means they went to live with someone, most of the time it's family, who took permanent responsibility for them. So the 40 reunifications out of that, that's a small number. We'd like to see a lot more.
A lot more, but that's entirely up to the parents managing to get their acts together. It's not really within our power to change that. And drugs are just such an affliction, particularly with the prescription drugs. It seems to me they're eating away through all parts of society. I mean, it really... well, I have another question for you, Alfreda. What's the most difficult type of case for you to work? What are the ones that have you losing sleep at night, or are you able to cope with all of them, however difficult?
Well, I think I'm able to cope, and I'm glad I'm able to cope, because as soon as you close the case, there's another one waiting for you, and that's fine. But I think the most difficult ones are the ones where there is an uneasiness as the final decisions are being made as to where the children are going to end up. Case that I just had that finished about a month ago, where the parents were really out of the question in terms of the solution for these children, both incarcerated or in and out of being incarcerated, living with a relative, and the case ends with permanent guardianship to that relative. But the uneasiness comes from the fact that the environment in which those children are going to grow in is noxious. And very, very rough, and not a loving, tender home that we're looking for. But at this point in time, legally, this is where the children end up, because there was
Yep.
no hard evidence that anything awful was going to happen to them. But those are tough situations where you have to say, okay, it's over, case is over, and you move on. And the children hopefully are in a better situation than they were when they first started coming in, absolutely.
Yep.
But not ideal, and then it troubles us when we have those situations.
I think one of the other eye-opening things for me was the number of cases where one or both of the parents are incarcerated. I mean, it's just, I never really stopped to think, what happens if dad is in prison and then mom goes to prison too? What happens to those children? It just wasn't something that I thought about, and sometimes it's a crisis. I mean, it happens so fast.
And sometimes there are no relatives around, and
Yeah.
so the foster system,
Has
comes
to
into
step
play,
in. Yeah.
and sometimes there are wonderful situations.
Yeah. And for you, Linda?
I think probably the hardest ones for me are the ones that there does not, just like you said, there's no clear, great storybook ending in sight.
Yeah.
There's not a parent available, or a grandparent available, or anyone in the family able or willing to take this child. It's heartbreaking. It's truly heartbreaking. And, the children, through no fault of their own, find themselves with their whole world upside down. So, and I think that's a big part of our job, is to be that constant person that shows that they care about this child. And, that's what we all try to do.
I think I've heard from several people who have now grown up and become successful graduates of the system that the guardian was particularly important to them, not just because that was the most constant figure in their life, but also because they knew this person was a volunteer, that they weren't being paid to be nice,
Yeah.
and that it was absolutely wonderful for them to know that there was somebody out there who really cared about them and took an interest in them just because. It gave them a sense of self-worth, and I think that probably is
Right.
something that we sense as guardians. It's our reward, that there's the feedback loop
Right,
of
right.
respect.
Because even in these situations, as Linda mentioned, where it's not a storybook ending, we know we've done something good
Yes.
in intervening in their lives. And if we weren't there, I'm glad the system is set up that way, that we can participate in something like that, because we do make a difference. And sometimes it sounds rather cliche to say that, but we do, and we have to accept the fact that yes, we made a difference in improving children's lives.
And we're dealing with so many children who are young. More than half of our children are under 5 years of age, which is just, all those formative years when they're learning about relationships and developing attachments, and parents aren't there for them. It's wonderful to be able to provide a guardian to be there for them.
I didn't even know that statistic. That's sort of shocking, I suppose. Yeah. Well, it sort of leads into the last question that I wanted to ask both of you, which is that this is a volunteer job, and yet you have real responsibilities. You're responsible to the court. In a sense, you're responsible to Pam and the program. And your decisions are probably going to affect the lives of children for years to come. That's a kind of heavy responsibility to take on. What motivates you to do that? And could we talk a little bit more about what the rewards are? Because obviously there have to be some, because otherwise there wouldn't be 405 people who are willing to do this. Linda?
Well, the children, that's it for me. I mean, I always try to take cases with smaller children because I feel like those are the most vulnerable, and working with the children is just fantastic. I love it. I just love it. They're, and it never ceases to amaze me that they are sweet, loving, in many cases very happy children, even though the situations that they've come from are just awful. It's really quite amazing.
And you were a teacher,
Yes.
and so you've probably seen children who were much more privileged and less happy in the past.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure that's
Yeah.
true, yes.
But I dealt with high school children, so that was quite different.
Well, you have to be a saint to do that too, I think. Maybe that's just how.
Crazy.
Alfredo, what about you?
I was a school principal in Boston, and so I come from that background of working with urban inner city kids and their difficulties, and that's been a passion of mine for pretty much my entire life. I have been privileged to have been raised in a loving, caring home and great education and experiences, and it's my responsibility to then share that with our community, like the way 400 volunteers do here in Manatee and Sarasota and throughout the country when all these volunteers participate. And I agree. The children, when they look at you, and I just saw a family yesterday that was my first family 3 years ago, and I still keep in touch with them and watch the kids grow, and they're healthy and they're well and they're happy, and you say, well, good, it worked, and it's a great satisfaction.
There are all sorts of other ones too. I always thought when I became a guardian that I would work with older children. I guess I'm just accustomed. I have 12 grandkids, so I'm used to being around neurotic teens. And I thought I would be really well qualified to deal with teens. And I keep getting assigned cases with newborn babies. I don't know how that happens, but it's just the need and what. And I have one case where the newborn baby can now, it's been going on for 10 months and she can walk. And she toddled over to meet me the last time I went to visit and put up her arms. And then when I picked her up, she buried her face in my neck. And you just melt. I mean, this is unconditional love that you've done nothing to earn, and you're just getting it. So we have, unfortunately, come to the end of our time. We just have a few minutes, a last quick thought. Alfredo.
Well, I think that folks who are listening to this program need to really think about what it takes to be a volunteer. There's information Pam's going to give, but consider it. It's a terrific and needed, unfortunately needed, service that we can provide our community.
Right, I would agree with that wholeheartedly. The need is very, very great. So anyone who loves children should consider to volunteer for the Guardian Ad Litem program.
Thank you. And Pam, final word?
I would just remind people to visit the website www.one2gal.org and call or contact us online. We'll be glad to talk to them about becoming a volunteer.
Well, and thank you so much for all the input. I enjoyed the discussion and I hope it was informative, and we'll look forward to seeing everyone again sometime soon.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much.